This is Money Moves on VSiN, the sports betting network.
Coming up in 15 minutes, looking forward to catching up with our buddy Greg Hoops Peterson. Going to look ahead to what is going to be a wild weekend in college basketball. We cannot forget, I do really enjoy this time of year because this is where you start to focus on college hoops. We are right, look, it's January 16th. You might not think it. We're right around the corner from Conference Championship Week. I'm telling you this right now, and very much looking forward to it. That will go by very quickly. Less than 60 days away from Selection Sunday for the NCAA tournament. Yes, less than 60 days. And, of course, the Super Bowl right around the corner. We'll be looking forward to broadcasting from San Francisco, myself, for Radio Row. That'll be a ton of fun as we get to Super Bowl week. But we have to take care of business in the divisional round and then subsequently the conference championship games first. So let's take a look at where we're at for our Sunday matchups in the NFL. And let's start with where we're going to be this coming weekend in a fascinating one. New England playing host to the Houston Texans. We saw this open 2.5 at some spots with a total of 41. Current number at that 3, juiced very much to the favorite side here at circa at minus 120 with a total of 40.5. We asked Mike Palm, who was with us earlier, if they would get the 3.5 here. He didn't foresee it, but we still have plenty of time before we get to Sunday, and there would be plenty of people lining up to take a juiced 3.5. It actually goes back to one of the conversations we've had here on this desk with Derek Stevens. That was during our Sunday shows on Countdown to Kickoff about the value of just taking the number of 3.5 and even laying that juiced price because the value of that number is actually worth it. And we'll see if those 3.5 start to appear. We'll say if you're out in Las Vegas, you do like the Houston Texans. South Point, who does not alter the juice, is sitting at 3.5, telling you what you would need out there over at the tip of the strip. So let's talk about this from the New England perspective first and foremost, because as we hit last week, this was the best defense, the Los Angeles Chargers, that the New England Patriots had faced since Week 8 against the Cleveland Browns. And one could argue the results were mixed for Drake May. 9.2 yards per attempt through the air sounds good, but committed 2 turnover-worthy plays, threw an interception, completed less than 60% of his passes. It was hardly an effort that was mirrored the ones that led up to that wild card berth for the New England Patriots. Let's hear from offensive coordinator Josh McDaniels, who had a lot of good things to say about this Texans defense and what exactly they do so well.
It's a challenge schematically, but it's a challenge. They have great players. They know what they're doing. They're fundamentally sound. You're going to have to drive the football. There's not a whole lot of easy opportunities. You're going to need to convert some third downs. And certainly take care of the football because they do an incredible job of taking it away. So I have a great deal of respect for the guys that coach them. And obviously they have elite players at all 3 levels of the defense. And what a challenge, what an opportunity for us to have a chance to play against a team like this that's playing their best football of the season. There's no question.
Yeah, this is, I like, there's a couple of key points there from McDaniels that I think are definitely worth harping on here. The first of which is, paraphrasing, you can't drive on this team. You're going to need to hit some explosives. The Pittsburgh Steelers learned that the hard way. The Steelers tried to peck at this team for the most part. There were a couple explosives that were left out there on the field. DK Metcalf drops a pass, the one that really comes to mind for Pittsburgh. But you're not going to, for the most part, string together the 7, 8, 9, 10 play drives against this Houston Texans team. You've got to be able to supplement some of that by getting some big plays downfield. And they did a great job of limiting that against Pittsburgh. They've done a great job of limiting those throughout the entirety of the year. And as we remember, the Steelers 3.1 yards per play in that matchup on during Wild Card weekend, on that Monday night. For Drake May, this is going to be fascinating as to whether or not you're going to be able to do that. Also, one of the things that is going to stick out, and I think this is going to be a betting angle for me as we get closer to these games to see where the market settles in. Drake May did a really good job against the Los Angeles Chargers with his legs and making some really good plays, converting on third downs and others, ran for 66 yards on 10 attempts. If you look at it from just a scrambling perspective, 5 scrambles for 60 yards, according to Pro Football Focus. Interesting stat that's been floated around there about the Houston Texans. They give up about 9.2 yards per scramble to opposing quarterbacks. Drake May should be able to, because it's a heavy man scheme, really tight to coverage, the ability to get through this pass rush if it goes by you, maybe be able to break one off here and use his legs to get some sort of offense for his team going. That is going to be a really incredible matchup to watch whether or not May can continue to get this done. Rushing prop for him at 35.5. The other side of this, though, and as Mitch Moss stole from me and then told Will Hill that he got it from our podcast, Pod to the Futures, download it wherever you get your podcasts, like, review, subscribe. We'd appreciate it. The Texans are the defense and the unit that I just blindly trust at this point right now. There is no balking in my faith that this team is going to go out there and do what they need to do, which is why, again, I gravitate toward them not only in this game at that 3.5 mark, but as well as a potential run here into the postseason. This is a defensive line that is going to be able to get after whatever offensive line is in front of them, and there are a couple of offensive lines in front of them that they can take advantage of. There was one last week and a quarterback who can't move. This week, they get a quarterback that can move, but an offensive line that allowed him to be pressured on the 5th most dropbacks in the NFL in the regular season. Last week against the Los Angeles Chargers, a pressure rate of 35.9%, so 14 of May's 39 dropbacks, he was considered pressured. He's going to be pressured again here against the Houston Texans. The problem becomes, what do we get from the Texans offense? And again, invoking what we saw against the Steelers, you could look at the surface and say 408 total yards, 6.2 yards per play. What's the big deal? Why does it matter? They played well. I don't know if that is truly the case. There is nuance to everything. And while the numbers, and this is one of the few times, right, that we're always a pro-number show here, and while the numbers would dictate that that offense played well, it didn't. And we know it didn't because we watched that game. We watched C.J. Stroud have issues with those snaps. We watched him complete 65% of his passes, but he committed 4 turnover-worthy plays. He doesn't run anymore, which is a really big issue. He was never going to be a dynamic runner, even to the level of Drake May, but he was at least a threat when the pocket broke and he could get out and give you a few yards on the ground, but C.J. Stroud has not been that. Again, he had 1 carry for 0 yards. If you look at his ability as a rusher, since he's come back from injury, he's had 1 game in which he ran for over 5. This has not been a part of the offense anymore, and Stroud all of a sudden has been putting the ball in danger at a much higher clip than what we're used to, and all of those things put together do give me some pause. The weather report, there's allegedly going to be some snow here. We'll see if that's going to be the case. That'll alter whether or not this team, in terms of the Texans, who already have some issues with their offense overall, are going to be able to operate at a high level. But even given all of that, I think this Texans defense, historically good at this point, is enough to maybe carry them through. So have not played anything yet, but 3.5 to me would be the play worth adding here for the Houston Texans, not widely available at this point right now. Let's talk about the other one, though, the one that I can't really think straight about, and that would be the Los Angeles Rams and the Chicago Bears. You talk about offense, and initially when you look at it on the surface, you would think that the Rams have no issues with their offense. One of the best running games in the National Football League, a quarterback that just won the first-team All-Pro mention at quarterback and might win Most Valuable Player. But Matthew Stafford has all of a sudden regressed in the category that matters most. He's putting the ball in danger over his last 3 games. He has committed 8 turnover-worthy plays. That includes the wild card game. So you go to Week 17 against Atlanta, Arizona, and the wild card matchup. This turnover-worthy play rate has skyrocketed for Stafford. It's been incredible to watch, and something that he hasn't really done that much throughout the year. Remember, he set the record for most consecutive touchdown passes without an interception earlier in the season. Here he was at media availability earlier this week talking about the importance of taking care of the football.
Yeah, that's kind of how they've thrived. Got a bunch of points off of turnovers. They've done a great job turning it over, like you said, leading the league in those kind of categories. I think it boils down to who their players are. They've got, a really good back end, talented back end that catches the ball when it's in their area. They do a nice job up front as well, affecting the pocket. So it'll be a big challenge for us every week. Is in this league. It's such a crucial stat, as we all know. It's points, then turnovers. So try to make sure that we do the best that we can to, still play aggressive and all that, but be sound with the football and make sure that we're in every drive with an extra point or a field goal or a punt, something like that.
Turnover the play rate since Week 15 for Matthew Stafford, 5.2%. Weeks 1 through 14, 2.1%. He has regressed for whatever reason to a large extent when it comes to putting the ball in danger. And as he alluded to in that answer, we could talk about the luck and the inability to consistently generate turnovers and the randomness of that at some point. But this Bears team has been one of the better teams at forcing turnovers and taking advantage of those turnovers forced. This is going to be a very important aspect of this game, considering how bad Stafford has gotten in that category. The other side of this, of course, is Chicago. We can have more on this a little bit later, but this is a group that can run the football against the Rams defense. And our buddy Will Hill, who was with us earlier, pointed this out. This is a Rams defense that has been very poor against the run, and defensively just overall, they have been a team that has regressed in that regard too. At one point, we're a top 10 unit, but right now the Los Angeles Rams have slipped to middle of the pack in a lot of key categories. Pretty poor against play action as well, and you wonder if the Chicago Bears are going to be able to take advantage of that. For the season, floating around 26 in the NFL, an opponent expected points added off of play action. And obviously, working the ground game and the ability to do that for Chicago is going to be a really big deal. I feel like Chicago can do this. I keep invoking that stretch where they were pulling everything out of a hat, and yet on a Black Friday, they played host to Philadelphia. They went out there and they won that game against the Eagles with a strong ground attack, and there is something here that they could do once again. Folks, before the line moves, the Sharp Plays is already there. January isn't about volume, it's about precision. The NFL playoffs are when limits rise, mistakes shrink, and timing matters more than ever. You're not going to outsmart billion-dollar sports books on your own, so use the Sharp Plays. You don't have to do it. Powered by advanced AI, connected to proven insider sources, and locked in on the NFL playoffs, the Sharp Plays helps identify where the sharp money hits before the number disappears. You get free daily reports, real-time alerts, market-moving insights delivered straight to your inbox or X feed. Since 2011, they backed it all up with documented results, public logs, and transparent receipts. SharpPlays.com. Trusted by pros, monitored by the books. Stay ahead of the line this postseason. Visit SharpPlays.com. Be curious to see where this number closes. As we mentioned, it opened 4.5 at some spots, got down to 3.5. Some of those 4s are starting to pop back up here for the Los Angeles Rams. Total starting to dip a little bit. That's going to be something I think that's worth monitoring too. If the wind is not too bad by the time we get to Sunday evening, might be still worth looking at it over here, depending on how low this gets, considering the ability of both teams to potentially move the ball against the opponent. All right, let's look ahead to the weekend that will be in college basketball on the other side. VSiN contributor and host of the Coast to Coast Hoops podcast, Greg Peterson, joins us next. So you're listening to this podcast because you want an edge. But what if I told you you're only halfway there? You've got the mindset. Now it's time to get the toolkit to match. Here's the thing. Pro bettors spend thousands on data and tools. But what they don't want you to know is that you can get the same edge for a fraction of the cost with VSiN Pro. VSiN Pro gives you access to expert picks, public betting data, prop projections, powerful tools, analytics, and more. Just tap the link in the description and see why thousands of bettors are already using VSiN Pro to cash more bets.
You're watching Money Moves here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
We were also getting some injury reports for the NFL games, and for the Chicago Bears, may be somewhat worrisome for some is the fact that Rome Odunze was on the injury report as questionable, but participated in practice in full on Friday. Nick McLeod in the defensive backfield will be out for this game. Jalen Reese-Maybin at linebacker is questionable to play as well. So we'll keep an eye on some of these injuries, get some news, notes, and more before we get out of here on a Football Friday. But we do have actually a sneaky good card tonight in college hoops and a really good card in the top 25 and beyond on Saturday. So let's bring in our guy in the progressive guest line, Greg Peterson. Coast to Coast Hoops is the pod at GUnit_81 up on X. Greg, let's start with tonight before we maybe zoom out, look at tomorrow and some of the teams that will be in action. I am going to selfishly take you to the nightcap tonight, or one of these games, in the Mountain West. I was just in the building the other day watching UNLV beat Boise State in overtime over at the Thomas and Mack Center. Now they're here as 5.5-point favorites over Colorado State, total 138.5. They are now 1-5 in conference play. The Broncos are having a little trouble against some guards who could attack off the bounce. Will they have some issues tonight against the Rams?
I took the points with Colorado State, and you go all the way back to the beginning part of the season. Boise State lost to Hawaii Pacific on their home floor. That is a Division II team that is based out there in a strip mall. Not a loss that you want to be taking to begin the season. And for Boise State, the one thing that they do really well is that they limit possessions. They're a top 20 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage, so you're not going to get a lot of second and third chances. Problem is, you've got a Colorado State team that's a top 5 team with their three-point shooting percentage. Now, they've been missing their top scorer in Kyle Jorgensen, and that's affected their offensive abilities a little bit, but you still have someone in Jevin Muniz who's a 6'5", 6'6", a little bit of a point forward. You still have guys like Kerry Booth and company that shoot it well from three, and I just feel like the Dylan Andrews experiment, not working with Boise State, was a double-figure scorer and a starter 2 years ago over at UCLA, and he's been able to give them a little bit of scoring, but he just doesn't feel like a fit with this Leon Rice system. Things appear to be a little bit disjointed. Now, I did take a shot on the under as well when this was 141.5. Now that's down to 138.5. I think that we're getting down a little bit too low, but personally, I did take that opener under, and I did take the points here with Colorado State.
Yeah, some rumblings in the building as well. That just the relationship between Leon Rice and Boise State, maybe not on the best. But hey, when you're together for a long time, sometimes that happens. Greg Peterson with us. All right, let's look at the Big 12. Is there a letdown in store for Kansas? Last time we saw them, a shocking result, maybe not the outright, but just the fact of the way it happened, a 84-63 win over Iowa State. Now you get to play host to Baylor. Market right now has Kansas as a 7.5-point favorite with a total of 155.5.
I don't think that Kansas is going to be losing this game outright, but keep in mind the game before that against TCU, they did get pushed to overtime on their home floor, and for Baylor, they just need to find depth because they bring in James Donji, the former 31st overall pick, and I feel like the market very much overvalued them after that because he has not done a lot for them, to say the least. That said, I did take the 7.5 here with Baylor. I made my line 6.5, so I do think that Kansas should still be able to get the job done. But with Kansas, even with Darren Peterson back, he's been able to give the team 20-plus points per contest, solid three-point shooter. This is more of a defense-oriented team. With Kansas, they're not going to generate turnovers, but they're a top 30 team in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage, and they really do a nice job down low. Flory Banunga being able to give you a block and a half per contest. You've been able to have these guys do a nice job not allowing second and third chances, and the lifeblood of this Baylor team is getting those second chances. They have been a top 20 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage. For Baylor, just not a lot of depth with them, but they do have a little bit of outside shooting with Cameron Carr being able to give you 20-plus points per contest. I think that this is also going to be very much a slow-down game because if you look at Baylor in terms of their total possessions per game in conference versus out of conference, they've slowed down by over 5 possessions per game in Big 12 games. So right now I'm seeing this total of a 155.5 with Kansas being a top 15 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis at home, mid-tempo team. Feel like this total's went too high. So like the under and the points with Baylor.
All right, let's go to the Big East. The side that I like today, Creighton's going to be on the road to take on Providence. They're 1.5-point favorites across the board. Some spots open 1 in favor of Providence. But, Greg, as you would know, the Friars have lost 3 straight, 5 out of 6. Their defense against Big East opponents and just in general has been pretty bad. They've given up over 1.2 points per play in each of their last 3 contests. Why am I supposed to believe that the Friars are going to start to play defense tonight against the Blue Jays?
They have done one thing on defense. They've been a top 50 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. And this has been a Creighton team that has been a little bit suspect with their 3-point shooting. Now, Austin Schwartz has helped out with that big time. The transfer from Miami, he wasn't getting a lot of playing time towards the beginning part of the season. Since that Nebraska game about a month ago for Creighton, he's been averaging over 14 points per game. That has helped this Creighton team ascend back into the top 125 in terms of their points per possession. That said, I did take a shot here on Providence because, well, this Providence team is playing no defense. And I'm in on the over as well because Providence is playing no defense. They're top 15 team in terms of total possessions per game. Creighton does not put you under duress. Creighton is outside the top 330 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. They've been a little bit unreliable down low. Oswin can never pronounce his last name for this Providence team. 2.5 blocks, 7 rebounds per game. I think that he's going to be able to win the battle down low. I think that Providence is going to get blitzed once again on defense. I think that they're going to give up 80-plus points. I just think that they're going to be able to score 80-plus points. I think that they win a classic shootout. So I'm in on the over, and I do think that Providence on their home floor gets the job done and took them on the money line.
All right, one more on Friday night before we move on. As the days roll on, the MAC is becoming more and more fascinating. Obviously, Miami, Ohio at the top of it, but there's a lot of pretty good teams here, and we get 2 4-1 teams in conference play going at it tonight. Kent State, coming off of a win against Buffalo on the road, will now play host to Toledo. Current number right now is Kent State about a 5.5-point favorite. Market's moved in their favor. It's also moved under. What are we looking forward here between Toledo and Kent State tonight?
I'm willing to lay it with the Golden Flashes. Now, with the Golden Flashes, they're going to have a little bit of a tough time with the Toledo team that surprisingly is generating turnovers. They're now a top 85 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. They're becoming one of those teams that sort of gambles for turnovers. So, and you'll find that a lot in college basketball. These teams that sell out for turnovers, if they don't get a turnover, they allow you to have a good look from 3. And this Kent State team shoots over 40.5% from three-point range at home. And Toledo just does not have anyone down low that's able to match up with Delreco Gillespie. 19-plus points, 13-plus rebounds per game, top 3 player in terms of rebounds per game. So Kent State is going to have a nice advantage down low. And this is a Toledo offense that just isn't what it has been in the past. They're outside the top 85 in terms of points per possession. Typically, Todd Kowalczuk's teams are a little bit better with their three-point shooting, hovering right around about country average with that three-point shooting percentage. Kent State much better at generating turnovers themselves when they're at home rather than away from home. I think that Kent State is able to get it done here on their own floor. And Toledo, they've had a nice start in conference play. They've also played some of the lesser teams in the MAC as well. So I think that this is a little bit of a wake-up call for them. Willing to lay with Kent State.
All right, let's fast forward to tomorrow. We don't have that many top 25 on top 25 matches, but the ones we do are very, very good. Let's start in the Big 12. Texas Tech playing host to BYU. Looking at the Red Raiders is about a 2.5-point favorite, total of 158.5. Cougars may be caught looking ahead to Texas Tech. Had to come back in the second half against TCU on their own home floor earlier in the week. What does A.J. DeMonsa and the Cougars have in store for those Red Raiders this weekend?
I don't know if that was a look at spot, more so than TCU has just been really good on the road. Like, they very nearly knocked off Michigan to begin the season. They played tough against Florida and Wisconsin, winning those games as well. Like, this is a TCU team that I think is just legitimately good. I don't think that that's a knock on BYU, but the one thing I'm going to knock here, Texas Tech just has not been great on the glass. Even though you've got JT Toppin, who gives you over 20 points, 10 rebounds per game, they're outside the top 125 in terms of defensive rebound percentage. I think a lot of people would be surprised to know. If you look at offensive and defensive efficiency, BYU actually ranks better in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis rather than points scored on a per possession basis, because A.J. DeMonsa, he is that marquee guy that gives you over 20-plus points per contest. You love Robert Wright, but this is a really good defensive team with BYU. They don't allow a lot of second and third chances. They're not a team that's going to generate a bunch of turnovers, but you just don't get clean looks against them. I have found that the backcourt of Texas Tech has been very hit or miss. I think that BYU matches up really well. I recognize that this is a road game in Lubbock, but personally, I have this line flipped. I had BYU as more of the 2 to 2.5 point favorite. So right now, seeing what I'm seeing right now, I'm going to be taking a shot on BYU on the money line.
All right, and what about in the SEC? Vandy coming off of their first loss of the season, and very quietly, Greg, the Florida Gators starting to get hot a bit here. They have won 3 straight, and I believe it's 8 out of the last 9. Are the Gators starting to turn this around? Can they hand Vandy a second consecutive loss?
It's going to be interesting with this one because you do have a Vanderbilt team that is currently dealing with a big-time injury of their own because they were having Frankie Collins do a nice job generating a lot of turnovers for them with his Vanderbilt team. I did set them here as more of a 6-point favorite just because I still can't trust that backcourt play of Florida. Florida is number 1 in the country in terms of rebound percentage, and Vanderbilt, in that loss against Texas, they did get blitzed on the glass. That is a concern, but you still have Devin McLaughlin, you still have Jalen Washington. I think that these guys are going to be able to do a fine job against a Florida team that has been turning the ball over a lot. And as we know, Memorial Coliseum, it's one of the more unique home courts in all of college basketball. The benches aren't just in a random spot. I think that Vanderbilt is going to be able to rebound here. They still are very good in terms of generating turnovers against a Florida team that doesn't shoot it well from 3. They don't do a great job in terms of valuing the ball. I think that this is a good bounce back spot for Vanderbilt. Made them a 6-point favorite. So right now, seeing that opener of 3.5, willing to lay it with the Commodores.
All right, Greg, we appreciate it. Coast to Coast Hoops. Check out that pod. The write-up's up at the website as well at VSiN.com. I actually really did want to ask about Minnesota and Illinois, which I think is kind of intriguing, but we'll have to save that for another day. Thank you, Greg.
Absolutely. You have a good one, John. Thank you.
Yep, Greg, again, GUnit_81. Folks, go to VSiN.com. Check out everything we have to offer up on the website. We got an annual subscription offer for you. It's our big game special, so check it out now. From $240 down to $180. Daily best bets, exclusive betting splits, full access to the VSiN tools, and more. All you got to do, use a promo code MONEY. VSiN.com/subscribe. Promo code is MONEY. Zach Cohen on the other side.
You're watching Money Moves here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
All right, last 30 minutes. We got a lot to get to, though, before we head off into the weekend. Remember that Mitch and Paul will be with you on Follow the Money coming up at the top of the hour. But we head back out to the Progressive Guest Line. Welcome in our next guest, senior editor, host, Hardwood Handicappers, a great podcast. You can follow him on Twitter at BettingOnX. He's the one, the only, Zach Cohen, who joins us now. Zach, we appreciate a couple of minutes. Before we get to some of the plays for today, did want to go back to last night just very quickly because there was a lot of good results. But the one I wanted to point, actually, there was 2 I wanted to point out. The first of which is the Milwaukee Bucks are everything narratively that we thought. They completely fall apart, get smoked by the San Antonio Spurs. And we mentioned this on the podcast yesterday. I just wanted to bring this up as a note for our audience moving forward. So the Utah Jazz lose 144-122 to Dallas. This team is going to totally do this. They sit Svi Mykhailiuk and they sit Jusuf Nurkic, coach's decisions, no injuries. Teams, and maybe I wanted to ask you this because I wonder if you agree or disagree, because I think you had good thoughts on this yesterday. Teams that are directly ahead of them in the standings now because of this whole issue with their top 8 protected pick, I think we want to play against Utah. They do not want to win those games. They will sit players in these games. Dallas is one of those teams that they're competing with for a lottery selection, and that's exactly how it happened last night.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the Jazz are a team to fade in general, just because I do think like anytime they're playing a back-to-back, they're probably going to sit their best guys. And like you just said, they really, really need that top 8 pick. So I do think that there's going to be shenanigans. Kelly actually was on Hardwood Handicappers with me this morning talking about the injury report and asked me how I like the new 15-minute thing. And I kind of realized that it really doesn't matter. Like the teams that are trying to tank are going to try to tank anyway. And there hasn't really been a change, in my opinion.
I would agree. So with that, let's talk about today with a couple of games that we have. First off, let's start with near the top of the rotation, New Orleans and Indiana. By their own standards, the Pacers are hot. They are laying 4 now with a total of 241.5. You got a player prop here, so what's our expectation?
Yeah, I have Zion Williamson over 23.5 points in this game, and I just think that the matchup's absolutely perfect for him. This Pacers team is 25th in the league defending around the basket inside 10 feet, and Zion scores 95% of his points there. Indiana's also a team that fouls a lot, and Zion's a guy that can absolutely live at the line if he's playing aggressively here, and we just saw him play really well in a meeting with the Pacers on December 20th. He had 29 points, and this is one of the games with the highest totals on the board. So I do think this is going to be an up and down contest, and I think that Williamson's going to end up having 24 plus. I actually think I was on with you the last time you had that.
4.5 is starting to pop up here. Is that a little too high? I mean, I know Indiana, again, by their own standards, is playing relatively well, but this seems to be a little bit of like 2 trains passing the night. Pelicans have not been covering numbers. Pacers recently have. As this continues to climb, like I think 5 will be my buy point, but what do you make of this in terms of it getting up to 4.5?
I was just going to say the same thing. If it gets to 5.5, I'd probably buy with the Pelicans. I do think New Orleans is a little disappointing because a few weeks ago I thought they looked like they were going to be a really strong against the spread team the rest of the season. But I said it on the podcast today, like Jordan Poole coming back derailed everything. I mean, they just never should have traded for him. And every time he's on the floor, he makes their team worse.
All right, let's go to Philly and Cleveland. It's a baseball set out there in the city of brotherly love. Consecutive baseball sets, by the way, for the Philadelphia 76ers. Had 2 in Toronto, now have 2 at home against the Cavaliers. A little bit of a revenge spot. Joel Embiid and Paul George both probable. Market right now sitting at Philly is a 2.5-point favorite. Some spots popping 3 with a total of 232.5.
Yeah, I really like the 76ers on the money line here. I probably would have liked it if the Cavaliers were at full strength, just because you said it. It's one of these baseball sets. They lost the first game in here, and I do think these teams are evenly matched enough that, you usually see splits in these types of series. But Cleveland's also missing Darius Garland and Sam Merrill now. Merrill injured his hand, and this is just going to be a matchup where I usually would say that Cleveland has the firepower in the backcourt to compete with Philly with, Edgecombe and Maxey. But without them, I do think it's going to be a little bit tough for Mitchell to kind of match that shot making. And I think Embiid's looked a lot better over the last couple of weeks. And Paul George has settled in nicely into a role playing, position on this team. And overall, I think that Philly has a much bigger edge in depth with those guys out of the lineup for Cleveland.
What do we do with Cleveland? They're 6-3 in their last 9 games. You mentioned, Darius Garland and Merrill, but for the most part, they're getting a little bit healthier. Max Strus will come back at some point. Is this a team to buy in a bad Eastern Conference? Everybody thinks the sky is falling, but I keep kind of feeling like I'm crazy and pointing out they've been really injured, and if they start to get healthy, you feel like they can be better.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely worth buying. Like, I think that there are 5 or 6 teams in the Eastern Conference that have a chance to win it, and I don't know that there's that much that really separates the teams. I'd say the Knicks, the Cavs, the Pistons, the Magic, the Celtics, and then I would throw the Sixers in there just because as of right now, this team is healthy. So when they are healthy, they have a chance against anyone. And the Celtics, I say that assuming that they will get Jason Tatum back, which, by the way, last night he's on the court after that game, you're mouthing that he's ready to go. Like I think he's probably really, really healthy right now, and they're going to keep him on ice a little bit longer just to be safe.
There's no way. I think he'll be back. I think we're kind of accepting that reality at this point right now. By the way, shout out to the Miami Heat for blowing it yesterday, catch it too, and it looked like they were going to get it done. But I feel like that was more of a I'm ready, as in like he's chomping at the bit. But he's not like actually. He tore his Achilles, and we're in January.
No, he's not ready. He's not ready. He's not ready. But he's like, he's getting there. I mean, I think he's going to be back in March, and I think he's going to give them really good minutes in the playoffs.
Okay. I mean, I'm watching it. This was like a month ago, but I'm watching videos of him dunk already and everything like that. It is wild. Yeah. Modern medicine, I guess. All right. Zach Cohen with us at Betting on X. Let's talk a little bit more here. You got a couple of other plays. Let's go Nets and Bulls. Last time we saw Chicago, they just barely got by the Utah Jazz. There was a front end of a back-to-back for Utah a couple of days ago. So now what do we do with Chicago here taking on Brooklyn? We've seen a flip of favorites, worth noting. Some spots open with Chicago as a slight favorite on the road against Brooklyn. Now it is the Nets who are a 2-point favorite across the board.
Yeah, I took the Nets minus 125, which is still available, so I'd be jumping on that if you have the chance to. I think that Brooklyn is just a better team than Chicago. Like, you look back to the start of December, and the Nets are like right in the middle of the league when looking at efficiency differential over at cleaning the glass. So non-garbage time, points per 100, points allowed per 100. This has been a really solid team, and the Bulls are a little bit further down in those rankings. They're number 22. The Nets are 16, and this is a third game in 4 nights for Chicago. And I said this on the podcast as well today, like, it's not football. You can't really say units, but I do think that the defense for the Nets is the best overall ability of any of these things that we're going to see on the court tonight, whether that's, Nets offense, Nets defense, Bulls offense, Bulls defense. I think that Brooklyn, they are a very good defensive team, which is shocking to me considering the players that they actually have on this roster. But Jordi Fernandez has done a good job with them, and I do think the Nets are going to bounce back after a bad loss in New Orleans.
All right, these last 2 games, I do have some interest in, and you have them as part of a parlay here, so we can attack each of these contests. Houston loses last night. The questions of this offense continue to rise. Their half-court offensive rating over the last week and a half, 2 weeks, has been absolutely abysmal. But they get lucky. There is no Anthony Edwards on the other side for Minnesota. So what do we make? Because if you've got a Houston-Sacramento parlay here, take it away.
Yeah, I mean, the Kings are just a juggernaut now. I mean, what did they won 3 straight against elite teams? So I think the Kings are going to get the job done tonight, especially with Domantas Sabonis coming back. The Wizards, like, this was the easier part of the parlay for me. It should never be easy to back the Kings, but the Wizards just, like, they moved, for Trae Young, 2 rotation pieces in Corey Kispert and CJ McCollum. And, say what you want about both those guys. This is not a team that's talented enough to lose 2 guys like that and not have a replacement. And they're not going to play Young, the rest of the season, it seems. So I just don't think this team has enough talent in their rotation, especially with, Bilal Coulibaly out. And now you have, Cam Whitmore just, is announced as out for the season with deep vein thrombosis. So I just think that team's going to get killed tonight. And I do think with this game, the Rockets and the Timberwolves, it's a matter of what you said. No Edwards against the 7th best defense in the league. Houston's offense definitely ugly right now. And I think they need to figure out how to get Reed Shepherd some bigger minutes and kind of let him play through some mistakes. But I do think they should win this game considering Edwards is out.
So I made the proclamation. We'll see if you agree with me here. Zach Cohen with us again. Follow him on X at Betting on X. Check out Harvard Handicappers, the podcast, the daily write-ups as well in the association. There's both player prop articles and side articles as well. And, of course, everything in between. I made the declaration earlier, though, that the top 4 in the West right now is going to be our top 4 when we get to the postseason in maybe a different order. But OKC, San Antonio, Denver, and Minnesota, you can quibble with the order. How much solid ground am I on in declaring right now, January 16th, those are going to be our top 4 seeds or teams with home court in the West?
I think those will be the top 4 when looking at the seeding in the playoffs, but I do think Houston's in that group of like the contenders in the Western Conference. I think that it's been ugly these last few weeks, but I do think they're going to figure it out, and I think that they are going to be just as dangerous as those other 4 teams. But the Timberwolves, that's my one. That's the one that I added a few days ago. I think that, if you're looking for kind of a long shot in the Western Conference or a long shot in general in terms of futures in the NBA, I think Minnesota to win the NBA title, Minnesota to win the West is a really good value play right now because this team is going to add something at the deadline, whether that's a bigger trade like one for Kobe White or a smaller one for like a Colin Sexton. I think they're going to add guard help, and I think they've been really, really strong on both ends of the floor over the last month.
Yeah, not to spit in the face of our Lord and Savior, LaMelo Ball, but I loaded up on a couple of Western Conference teams, Nuggets, and I followed you on the Timberwolves to win the West as well. This Nuggets team, I mean, I've texted you guys about this. Now 5-3 in these 8 games without Jokic. They've been very, very good, so we'll see if they can keep this up. Zach, appreciate it. Thank you very much. Good luck tonight, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, you too.
Yep, again, Zach Cohen, Harvard Handicappers Podcast. Check out the articles up at vsin.com. And when you go there, hit subscribe and check out all the specials. Use the code MONEY and sign up as well. All right, we'll take a break. We'll come back, recap last night and best bets. Look ahead to the weekend. That will be as well. Don't go anywhere.
You're watching Money Moves here on VSiN, the sports betting network.
A little bit of news here as we get ready for the divisional round. Mitchell Paul will have the ramifications of everything, but just coming down, it is official. According to Adam Schefter and the team, the Texans have officially ruled out wide receiver Nico Collins for Sunday's game against the Patriots. Obviously, as we know, the concussion is what Nico Collins is dealing with at this point right now. See if he can get out there. The other concussion we're watching is whether or not Christian Gonzalez can be out there for the New England Patriots. No update on that yet, but official. The Houston Texans have ruled out Nico Collins. That comes down about 15 minutes ago from the team on the official injury report. As these are coming down too, by the way, got the official injury reports for all of these up now for these games. For these teams as well, should note that Harold Landry is a questionable DNP today for the New England Patriots. Terrell Jennings is questionable as well at the back end of that running back room for the New England Patriots after a full participation in practice. And let's see. Yep, it looks like Christian Gonzalez will play, full participant again today, and did not receive an injury designation. So New England Patriots healthy as they head into the weekend matchup with the Houston Texans. Current numbers right now for these matchups as we get closer, and we'll have more on these and best bets coming up shortly. But right now, Houston Texans catching 3 with a total of 40.5. All right, best bets. Get back to last night really quickly. We have some in the NFL, nothing in the association tonight, but a recap of yesterday in the National Basketball Association. We did miss it out with the Miami Heat catching 2 in that matchup, but a relatively good day overall. Magic get there in the morning windows. We were sweating that out with Stormy. Grayson Allen over 2.5 3-pointers. Hornets plus 4.5, and that game goes over the total of 231.5 as well. Went over every number that was posted for that. So nothing in the NBA today, but do have a couple of plays that are still sitting and pending for the weekend in the National Football League. Broncos, a pick that was added earlier this week here on Money Moves, and Broncos plus 7.5, Seahawks minus 1 as a 6-point teaser this coming weekend. Going back to this Broncos play, I got to say, I am feeling a little hesitant on what this is going to be, only because going back and kind of digging through a little bit more, and this is one of those where I thought, hey, look, number-wise, this probably should be a little bit more in favor of Denver. They deserve to be favored on their home field. But looking at the way that Denver has played defensively in the last few weeks, outside of the 2 weeks against backup quarterbacks and Chris Oladokun and Trey Lance, this defense did take a step back by their own standards coming out of the bye week. And Buffalo, they can run the football with James Cook and obviously with Josh Allen if he's fully healthy. Allen told media during his availability earlier this week that he's fine and that he's not really feeling anything at this point right now. And if that's true, that's going to be pretty big for Buffalo as they head in here. Would expect a lot of action for these tight ends as well, considering you only have 3 healthy receivers. And I'm going to be really curious to see what the role of Keon Coleman is in this game for the Buffalo Bills. As I keep joking that they don't like Keon Coleman, that's been every part of what their actions have said at the very least. Shavers played more snaps than him in that game the other day, despite the fact that he was dealing with this torn ACL. But Coleman's got to be a big part of what the Buffalo Bills want to do here in this game if they're going to offset some of the issues that this team has at the injury spot. But Coleman last time out, just 1 target, 1 reception. That was 36 yards. Not really an impactful performance. One would assume that maybe he has a little bit more of an impact here against the Denver Broncos. The flip side of this is going to be whether or not Denver is going to try and actually run the football here against Buffalo. That was mind-blowing when you were watching this Jacksonville team almost refuse to run the football to an extent. Only 10 attempts for Travis Etienne in that game. He averaged 6.7 per attempt. Bashal Tutin in that game, if you remember, if you were with us on Live Bet Sunday, that was something we had added in-game. 4 attempts, 51 yards, 12.8 yards per attempt. Those all came essentially on one drive against Jacksonville. The Jags outright refused to run the football at times, despite the fact that they ended the game averaging over 6.5 yards per carry against Buffalo. We know what Buffalo's weakness is. And we know that Sean Payton, he's not going to line up and run the ball 30 times, but I do think that he is, as a play caller, smart enough to realize what this matchup looks like, that he is going to be able to run the football here and have some success on the ground. So I believe that in a tight game here, they're going to be able to pull this off, not asking them to cover a big number, just asking them to win, and I think they can do just that. And I'll reiterate what we've talked about before. I do think from a teaser standpoint, either side, similar to what we talked about last week with Green Bay and Chicago, I think either side is pretty strong. So if you didn't get Denver teased up, I think that you can tease up Buffalo as well. I feel relatively comfortable in a game with a relatively low total that this is going to stay inside of that 7.5-point margin for either of these teams. And this would be, I think at least, a massive win for Josh Allen if he can pull this off, given the injuries. Both sides, by the way. Poyer's not going to play this week either for the Buffalo Bills. So if Buffalo can pull it off, I think it'd be great. But I will say I have cooled on at least my confidence in the Denver Broncos. Still like the side, but felt like this was a really strong one and one of those like, hey, if I lose to the Buffalo Bills, then I lose. But looking at it more, there are more paths than I think I gave the Buffalo Bills credit for than winning to win this game. San Francisco and Seattle, an update here for those who maybe haven't seen it. The news of the day yesterday was that Sam Darnold was added to the injury report as questionable, but every single indication, in fact, if we can get that ready, we'll hear from Darnold one more time. Every indication is that Darnold is going to play. In fact, it's what he told the media yesterday as well, but currently 7 the number with a total of 45. Here was Darnold yesterday on not only if he would play, but what the impact of the injury is going to have on his game.
Dave, how you feeling?
Feel good. Yeah, obviously, just in routes on air, just kind of felt a little something in my oblique. Just didn't want to push it. Wasn't the day to push it, so that was it. So just came inside, got some rehab, and feel like I'll be ready to go for Saturday.
That was just today that happened?
Yeah.
You ever had anything, oblique issues or anything?
No, never had oblique issues, but it's fun. We'll attack it the next couple days and be ready to go for Saturday.
Is this on throwing side?
It's just on my left side. It is what it is. But yeah, again, like I said, felt it on a throw, but we'll be ready to go.
And I will be ready to watch this. This is going to be interesting. She teased down Seattle, but you go back to what Sam Darnold has done over the course of the last 8 weeks here, and he has not been playing right, and now he's got to deal with this oblique, which I am not, a doctor of kinesiology in any way, shape, or form, but one would assume the oblique is somewhat important, no matter what the side is, in putting some torque on the ball and throwing it downfield. But if you look at Darnold and the way that he's regressed over the last few weeks, it has not been pretty. Touchdown to interception ratio, first 10 weeks of the season, 3.2. In the last 8 weeks, a flat 1. And the turnover with the play rate has spiked despite the fact that he has not taken shots downfield. Teaser seems safe. Don't really trust him to cover the 7, but this defense has matched up well. And I thought Will Hill, who was with us earlier, if you missed out on any part of it, you can check out wherever you get your podcast, Money Moves, like, rate, review, and subscribe. Get a really good angle here with Mike McDonald, of course, being on those sidelines when you talk about especially that Ravens game and the way that he had put Brock Purdy into a blender with his defensive game plan on that fateful Monday night many years ago. All right, with that, a couple of other quick updates here. We've talked about pretty much all of these games, and again, I'll just reiterate that Chicago, I do think is live, but I think I'm a little clouded in the judgment, so we'll see if we can pull this off. I did want to add one more bet, and I did not send this in. I apologize, Justin, but we'll be playing Creighton today against Providence. We're floating at like a 1 in favor of Creighton against Providence in college basketball. Totals at 162 or 162.5. I'll reiterate what we talked about with Greg Peterson here. Friars come into this thing. They've lost 3 straight and 5 out of the last 6. What has stuck out, though, is this defensive rating is starting to crater here at this point. Against Big East opponents, 117.7 defensive rating for Providence. If you look at their last 3 games, defensive ratings of over 120 in 3 straight. And in 4 of those 5 losses, a defensive rating of at least 120. In fact, the game against Butler had an defensive rating given up 1.3 points per possession. Trust that Creighton is good enough here in this spot to get this done. Creighton on offense, top 50, and against Big East opponents, they've done a pretty good job. First in the Big East early on in conference play. An effective field goal percentage, have shot the ball pretty well at 37% and have dominated inside, really leading so far against Big East opponents in 2-point percentage. A lot of that has come a little bit farther out than you would like, but I don't really trust Providence defensively at this point. They have not been able to stop a nosebleed. And since I brought this up to Greg, I just want to reiterate here, one of the games over the weekend that I'm going to be very interested in seeing where the market goes and maybe taking a piece of it or not, Minnesota and Illinois. Illinois right now is a 15.5-point favorite. Total's 139.5. I've mentioned this to Stormy before, but the Golden Gophers, more at home than anything else, have some of those impressive pelts on the wall. But on the road, it's been a little bit uglier. And you look at what Minnesota has done in their last few games, 3 straight one-score games for Minnesota on the wrong side of 2 of them. Lose in overtime to USC, lose on a dramatic last-second shot to Wisconsin. Those were both at home. You do wonder if maybe the wheels fall off out on the road against Illinois, part of a 2-game trip that we'll see over the next couple of days. Minnesota will be at Ohio State coming up on Tuesday as well. I know it's a weird one-off game, but Minnesota's a team, I think throughout the course of the season, like I told Greg, you kind of get your eyes on some of these teams, and you start to watch maybe 1 or 2 just because they pop up here and there. But Minnesota's a team that I've been watching a bit of. And Nico Medved, really good coach, obviously formerly of Colorado State. All right, that does it for us. Please check out the website. Go to vsin.com/subscribe. Use the code MONEY. Sign up for everything that we have to offer. Get in on the special. Mitch Moss, Paul Howard will take you from here. So don't miss out. It's divisional round weekend. It's the best weekend in the NFL playoffs. Mitch and Paul will get you covered on every inch of it. Coming up next.